Well, hey YouTube, my name is Robert and I own a telemedicine company and I spent a career in public health dealing with childhood obesity. And for that reason, I think you might be interested in my reaction to this Hims Super Bowl commercial, which has been making news all over the place. And it seems like Hims is in a real fight with FDA and regulators and things like that, a fight that I think they ought not to get into, but more on that later. A little bit about my work in childhood obesity. So I had an opportunity to work all the way from Alaska all the way down to Miami, Florida. And if you think about it, so that's north and south. And then on the West Coast, California had a contract with Caltrans, things like that. Moving a little bit further east, Native American communities and reservations in places like Arizona, all across the Midwest and all the way out to Maine. So I actually had an opportunity to work in 39 different states, thousands of school districts, and met tens of thousands of people and families and children all across the country on this extremely important topic. And so this is a subject that's near and dear to my heart. And with that in mind, let's take a look at this Super Bowl commercial from Hims.
Obesity is America's deadliest epidemic.
This is America.
74% of us are overweight, and obesity leads to 500,000.
Well, I do like the fact that they said us, 74% of us, but they started this commercial with a purposely shocking, abdomen, basically. And it is extremely difficult to separate the medical component. I haven't seen all of this commercial, but I'm sure they're going to be talking about the medical, metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, shortening of life, limb amputation. I'm sure they'll talk about all of that stuff, all of which is true. But they've also already put in the aesthetic component because make no mistake about it, that is who a lot of their buyers are people who are buying semaglutide for cosmetic reasons. When I worked in school districts across the country, a lot of funders wanted to know which interventions were working and which interventions were not. And as a result, you often had to weigh and measure children during a part of their yearly physical. Same time in a lot of these low-income school districts, there would be dental examinations and things like that. Well, parents had to sign off on this idea of their children's BMI data basically being collected. And, I totally get it because they wanted to know which of these things were working and which weren't. Not on the individual children, but is the kindergarten class healthier this year than it was 5 years previous, that sort of thing. And so many parents objected to that. And when you asked them about it, they would say, well, I was bullied for my weight as a child, and I do not want that to happen to my children as well. And I completely understand that. So you have to be so careful when you're talking about things like semaglutide and the obesity epidemic in America, that you're talking about health outcomes and not aesthetic components, which they have already intertwined into this Super Bowl ad, not even 3 seconds into it.
1 million deaths each year.
Why, you just have to stop eating, Jimmy.
This is America.
Something's broken. It's not our bodies. It's the system. Welcome to Weight Loss in America.
Like and subscribe.
A $160 billion industry that feeds on our failure. There are medications that work.
Well, they said something's broken, it's not our bodies, it's the system. And then I thought they might talk about food and exercise and unsafe neighborhoods and food deserts and low income and how every family has to be 2-income family now if they're so lucky as to have both parents in the household. But instead they talked about the failed diet industry. And I can already tell that the very next thing they're going to do is talk about Ozempic or semaglutide is coming to the rescue.
But they're priced for profits, not patients.
This is America.
This system wasn't built to help us. It was built to keep us sick and stuck. But not anymore. Hims and Hers offers life-changing.
There are medications which help. Yeah, the medications, I'll get into that. I'll get into that later.
Weight loss medications. They are affordable, doctor-trusted, and formulated in the USA. You get a treatment plan designed by a doctor to fit your body, goals, and lifestyle. You deserve to feel great in your body. This is the future of healthcare. This is Hims and Hers. Join us in the fight for a healthier America.
Oh, so many things here. Hims is presenting this as their saviors for America's obesity epidemic because they are pricing this medication for patients and not for profits. Hims is an incredibly large telemedicine company that is publicly traded. And, scrolling down here at the comments, and I already knew this would be true. Here's a comment: as a lifelong shareholder for 2 years, I am super excited and find this commercial extremely effective in its measuring. 4 applaud hands emoji. Next comment: proud Hims shareholder. Third one: Hims to the moon, which I think is a stock. I think is a stock reference, and yes, that's exactly what this is about. Look, let me tell you about obesity in the United States. There are millions of causes of it, and while semaglutides have been helping some people who are adults and dealing with obesity, it is really a 100-year fight if we're actually going to solve this problem, and solving the problem has absolutely nothing to do with semaglutide. What we found in working in childhood obesity is we used to look at really early education, so like kindergarten, first, second, third grade, and what we found is that honestly, it's really too late. Now, not for the individual child, so if your child is overweight as a second grader, I don't mean that, but I mean systematically. So what we found is that children who were overweight at 2 or 3 years old were undoubtedly going to be overweight in early education. And then in junior high, the weight really exploded. And then high school, and then whenever they became adults, to ever get their weight back under what would be considered healthy levels is an almost unbearable fight that a few people can do, but emphasis on few. And for most people, it is just sort of a predetermined set weight point at that time that they would have to fight like hell for the rest of their life to not have things like metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, all of these sorts of things associated with it. So if I was Hims, what I would have done is I would have talked about all of these sorts of systematic things. I would have talked about food deserts, low income, school lunches, physical activity, safe neighborhoods. Maybe Hims should do something like build playgrounds across the country. They certainly have the funding for it. And then people still would have went to hims.com and found out about semaglutides. They didn't have to make a commercial like this. One more thing that I will mention about this is that compounded drugs in the United States do not have to be approved by the FDA. The FDA neither approves nor disapproves compounded drugs. And if you're not familiar, this is where you take active ingredients and formulate them in a pharmacy, right? So I'm not sure of a good example right offhand, but you probably get the point. Now, the feedback that I've seen on this is when people are upset because this commercial does not have the side effects and things like that a general FDA-approved medication has to have to advertise, Hims comes back with basically, and I'm paraphrasing, F off, we don't have to, it's a compounded drug. And that, I think, is completely the wrong message, because Robert Kennedy has already talked about banning the advertisement of prescription drugs to people already. He's already talked about it. It's something that he may well try to do. And so if I was Hims, I would not have this fight, because in most countries it is illegal to make compounded drugs, and it is illegal to advertise pharmaceuticals at all to the population. And both of those things could happen in the United States in the next year if people get their heads together and decide to do that. And I feel like this fight with Hims about their Super Bowl ad, which is distasteful in my opinion and unhelpful, is just a step towards that. So I'm Robert from Shameless Care. Thank you.